Hi everyone, peace be with you, and I hope you're all having a blessed Sabbath. It's been quite a while since I posted my last video, and I want to thank you all for your continued support and your comments that I've been receiving week by week. I hope you're all doing well, and I am gonna pray to God again, and I always do, to make sure that all of you who are watching my video, you are safe, there's peace, and God is blessing you every day, especially in this time where there's a lot of turmoil, wars, and uncertainty that's going around, and we need to maintain our faith every day. Not much has happened on my end, and I only want to thank God that He's always kept me safe and well, right? And I continue to pray, especially for all the families, the people during the war in Iran, and all the countries that are struggling to, you know, not sure if they're going to be alive the next day, right? And all we have to do right now, if you are in a country or if you're in a place where you are still safe and sound, please pray for them. They need our prayers, they need our support, and they need us to think about them during those difficult times. I know I get carried away during the week, but it's always important to just remember them and just offer a prayer to look after our brothers and sisters that are struggling and are in a period of time of turmoil. Now, I wanted to I wanted to talk about it today with all of you about something that's happened for the last few weeks. See, I'm part of a church in Toronto. And they are a wonderful group of people that I was actually invited to. I was actually baptized in this church about 5 years ago, right? And obviously, in a church, you're in a community, and they're always here to look after you and welcome you. Especially for me, when I come from a not from an Adventist background, right, or not even close to a Christian background, but as from a Muslim background. How do I get from being a Muslim to being a 7 Day Adventist, right? That journey that God has led me, you know, uh, anyone that asks me about my testimony, the center has to be God in this, right? And sometimes when I listen to testimonies, I hear the comment that, well, Sister Anderson, or Sister Maxine, or Sister Julia, like, she has such a beautiful testimony. What an amazing testimony. It touches my heart. When I hear something like that, I think about it as, wait a minute, why are we saying it like, oh, Sister Julia had such an amazing testimony? Why don't we say that, while God has, blessed Sister Julia and brought her to this point in her life, right? God led her to come forward and be closer to God, right? There's no sense of God whenever I hear those comments. So I've been joining on, during the night of Sabbath, Friday night. They have those prayer meetings, right? Zoom prayer meetings, and they're called Vesper service. And I would join this through my local church, and I would join, and it's a prayer meeting, and it's led by the seniors of the church, right? And I joined there because obviously I want to feel the presence of God, right? When we step into Sabbath, we're in a bubble where we're supposed to be in the presence of God. And I love the fact that they have those prayer meetings, they have those worship studies happening during Sabbath, so that you feel even more closer to God, and you're doing everything to praise and please for Him, so that we feel a sense of comfort, right? But for some reason, I don't know if this is just me, but I want to talk about this here, is when I join these prayer meetings, I just don't feel that presence. I don't feel the presence of God. I don't feel that God is with us, right? And I don't know why, right? At first, I didn't know why, but now that I think about it, it does make sense. Because at first, when I felt it, I came out of it as, wow, Sister X said this, Sister X said that, right? What an amazing, service Sister X did. But when I was saying that, or when I heard people saying that, I'm like, wait a minute. Why aren't we praising God? Why aren't we saying God did this? God did that. God led us into this discussion. God was with us in this, in this prayer study, right? And that was the key to me, because a lot of times that I've noticed is that in churches and in these prayer meetings, worship studies, or Bible studies, we tend to lose the central focus, which is God, and focus on ourselves, right? I hate to say this, and I'm sure I'm going to get negative comments about this, right? And negative comments about this, but I feel like I need to say this, and I'm not sure if everyone feels it that way, but the just think about the reason why we go to church. I'll be honest, I don't go to church on I haven't gone to church since I got baptized, and I'll explain why. See, when I before leading up to going to get baptized and making that decision, I've been going to church on Saturday, to the same local church I got baptized. And during the service of the church, like that 3 hours of service they did, a lot of singing. And I know they are singing related about, the hymns, and it's about God. But I hear the comments that, wow, this young child has a beautiful voice, or Sister X sings so beautifully, like it touches your heart, or Brother X, what a powerful, message he's done, right? And I'm thinking though that why are we centralizing the individual? Because God is the one that gifted Sister X to have a beautiful voice, and God gifted her, and she is using it in this purpose beautifully, right? We tend to lose the sight of God. You go to the house of God to feel his presence. You want to be closer to him, right? You want to be feeling that, God, I'm coming and kneeling in your presence. I want to feel you with me. I want to feel closer to you, and I want to be worshiping you and praising you, right? But nowadays, when you do go to an Adventist church, right? And I'm not talking like in any church, but if you're looking at it specifically, the Adventist church, you don't see that. You don't see God being the central, unfortunately, right? You hear about the opening of the service talking about the community, the community opportunities, right? Building the church, or what outside of Sabbath, what are some of the activities that the church is doing. So you go through all these announcements. Then you have the children's story, which I find cute, but again, the idea behind it is you want to be worshiping towards God. So I find, you get the children's story, and then you go into the depth of the sermon, right? But the sermons, the main sermon, sometimes I feel that our local Adventist churches are not getting deep into the Bible, right? A lot of loud, as I say, like loud emphasis in the messages, right? And a lot of surface level discussion points that are made on the sermon, but not to the meat of it, right? Not to the real reason that we see in the Bible, right? And then, yes, lots of singing. But if you have read the writings of Mrs. White, you know that when we are singing in the church, it should be very, soft, harmonious, right? Not with guitars and drums and, loud music and, happening in the church, which is what I experienced before leading up to being baptized, right? And those 3 hours, and then the last segment would be more of meeting the church members, and guess what they're talking about. They're talking about that, oh, like the things that are happening in their week, right. Oh, Sister X made this amazing potato salad, right. Or Brother X, is working on a contract or something like that. In the house of God, we're talking about all these secular items, right. And God bless you, right. You're looking like they'll put these phrases in, right? But still having those secular discussions or talking about not the central aspect, which is God, right? I want to talk about a verse in the Bible. I want to talk about the current events that are happening and how it's tied to the Bible, but no one seems to want to talk about it. No one really wants to speak about, how the Bible is infiltrated into our life and how it should be infiltrated in our life, how we should be leading and walking the life just like Jesus did on this world once. And so these conversations, I feel like I can't seem to have that in the Bible, in the church, right? No one seems to be talking about it. And so I joined these prayer meetings recently to see that maybe things have changed. Like, let's take a look at it, right? And behold, I see the same thing, right? I joined that for an hour, and same thing. We talk about the like we sing some hymns, right? Again, great that we're praising God, right? But again, I hear the comments that Sister X, you have a beautiful voice. But I'm thinking that no, thank God that God gave her such a beautiful gift and she's using it that way, right? So I don't hear those comments, which makes me feel that they don't feel the presence of God in this prayer meeting, right? And then of course there's prayer requests, and then testimonies too. Not one testimony that I've heard in the prayer service or in those prayer meetings where they thanked God, right? But said, I went through this, this is how I became an Adventist, right? Or I found the path. Is always I, but never of God led me to it. God wanted me to do this. God placed me here, right? So it was lacking the central component, which is God, and hence why I don't go to churches, right? Because it's missing that element. I want to go to a church where I can feel the presence of God with us as we're studying and reading His Word, and singing praises about Him, right? We're not singing just you know just for the sake of it, or just to show off that we have an awesome singing voice, right? And it tends to be like that. It honestly tends to be like that. Sometimes I'll see two girls that are singing, they're always competing, and I can hear the comments saying that, oh, Sister X was much better today in her singing as opposed to Sister Y the other couple weeks ago, right? So we're missing the plot, as to say, right? We're missing the central focus, which is why we go to church, right? What is the purpose of going to the house of God, right? The church is a place where we should be feeling even closer to God, especially on Sabbath, right? Same for those worship prayer meetings, or those worship services that happen through Zoom calls or even in person. You need to feel that presence of God. And if you're not feeling that presence of God in that time, then between you and me, I will say that you're wasting time, because you're wasting the time because you're not feeling God being with you. Are you doing it for the sake of God, or you're doing it for the social aspect, right? Let's be honest. A lot of people that go to church, it's for the social aspect to it, right? I'm gonna see Sister and Brother X today, right? I haven't seen them for so long, right? I know they've been struggling with their health for a couple of weeks. I'm gonna go see them on church. You don't go to church to socialize, right? Yes, that's a bonus. That's an extra piece to it. That's, as humans, we have that tendency to socialize and be there for our brothers and sisters. I'm not discrediting that, but you have that for other days of the week, right? This one day on Sabbath, we should be focusing only on God. I want to go to church where I don't need to socialize. I don't need to feel the need to socialize, because I'm going to church to focus on God. I want to continue building an in-depth relationship to God. I'll give you an example. In the Bible, we see we see some verses about Enoch, right, in Genesis. And Enoch, had a very profound and in-depth relationship with God, right? He didn't have any friends or socialized, at least if you read it from that aspect, right? He walked with God. When you see that, when you see that sentence in the Bible, in that verse in the Bible, he walked with God, that means he sat down, he prayed, he talked to God. He didn't need anyone, right? Of course, he would preach about it with other people, but then he would always resort back to God and have the conversation. And this is why he's the first and only one where God just took him. Enoch never had to face death. God just took him. That's how close Enoch was with God, right? And that's what we should be heading towards. We should be approaching towards. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect, but I want to reach that point where I don't need anyone except God, right? We're getting towards the time of trouble where, we'll have laws, we'll have, where, we will be prohibited from going to churches, having those social settings in the guise of religious context, right? And then what's going to happen, right? What's happening in Iran, where they had to go underground to have those local church and communities and study the Word of God. But what if that's not there? I've seen countless stories where, true Adventists, not Adventists, but like God's people that had to be in prisons, had to, go in secret, in hiding to worship God. And that's going to happen. Can you worship God and maintain your faith without having people around you to, support you, advocate for you, or say that you can do it, sister X, you can do it? No, you're not going to have these people. You need to have and cultivate that relationship with God, not thinking that there will be a time where you will not have anyone with you. You may wake up in the middle of the night thinking, and all of a sudden having that anxious thought in your within you. You can't just call anyone. I'm sure you'll have people today you'll call, but I'm a type of person that I'm not going to call and disturb someone's sleep if I am having that anxious feeling. I'm just going to sit and offer prayer to God until I feel comfortable, until I feel that comfort, right? And that's what we should be heading towards, right? We shouldn't be depending on other people to reinforce our faith. We shouldn't have to depend on our grandparents, our parents, our friends, our brothers and sisters just to reinforce our faith or feel that we're in the right place. We shouldn't be feeling that way. I'll be honest, making that decision from Muslim to Adventist, I didn't have like a big community behind me to make that decision. That decision had to come from God, and he allowed me to get to that decision, right? That's the idea. And so I know this is a very controversial topic I am discussing here, because a lot of the brothers and sisters in the church, they have such pure hearts, right? I have no I have no issues with that. I have no issues with their faith, right? I'm not here questioning their faith. I'm not here to discredit them in any way, but we're missing the reason why we observe Sabbath. We are missing the reason and who we're doing this for. That's who we're missing, right? We're missing the presence of God when we're in the church, or when we're having those prayer meetings and discussions. I guarantee you that those prayer meetings that were done after Jesus' resurrection by the disciples or Mrs. White is a lot different than the prayer meetings we have in our local churches. I guarantee you that, right? And I'm really hoping that, like especially with those prayer meetings that are happening with my local church, I'm praying to God that He gives me the strength and gives me the right words, how I say it, because I would love to. Maybe that's probably why God placed me here, to change things around in those prayer meetings. These prayer meetings that were done by my local church have been done for years, right? And of course, for me coming in as one of their, this is a senior prayer meeting, and me coming in as someone young, you know, try getting God's way into these sessions, it's not going to be easy. But if God wants me, if God placed me in those meetings, there must be a reason why. And I can only think of that one reason, right? He's placed me for that specific reason, to bring the focus back to Him, right? So please pray for me that in the coming weeks that I'm able to bring the focus back to Him, where, the sisters and the brothers that are in those prayer meetings have an open mind and open heart to receiving, I wouldn't say feedback, but receiving the real truth behind why we're having these meetings. It's for God. It's for God. It's for God to be in those meetings with us, right? And we need to remove the central part of us. We need to remove the I and replace it with God. So thank you so much for hearing me today. And please definitely post your comments and your thoughts about this. I know it's a very controversial topic I brought up, but I would love to hear your feedback and your comments about it. But our churches today, our local churches today, just a social gathering, right? As is a question that I'm posting to everyone here. Is it a social gathering today? And are we missing the central focus, which is God? Thank you so much for hearing me today, and peace be with you. And I hope you're all continue to having a blessed Sabbath.